My experience in the woods. I'm fairly new to Reddit, so only discovered this sub recently. Using a throwaway account here because I didn't feel comfortable enough sharing this on my main account. I've lurked for a little while and I think it's the perfect place to share the story of an experience I had about 9 to 10 years ago. The reason I'm sharing his is A, because that's the point of this sub and I've enjoyed reading others' experiences, but B, to see if anyone has a similar experience / an idea of what this could have been, because I never have. Before I start, I've told this story to lots of people over the years, friends, family, even acquaintances whenever supernatural / scary stuff has come up in conversation. But I've always left out the finer details on purpose because honestly, I think I have some latent trauma from it. I don't like going into detail about it or reliving this experience. Instead, I have only ever recounted this as a 60-second scary story to elicit a reaction, probably as a coping mechanism. My girlfriend is the only person I have ever told the full story. To be clear, I am not trying to convince anyone of anything here. You can believe what you want and I respect your opinion. But I'm also not going to debate or argue over something I know to be true. This experience happened when I was wild camping on my own in a forest in Wales. I live in England, near the Welsh border. This is something I've done dozens of times and continue to do to this day. I think it was April or May 2013 or 2014. Weather was unseasonably good and this was the second of 3 nights that I'd planned for my trip, although it ended up being the last. First night and second day had been great, got a lovely long hike and followed by a pub lunch. I'd driven back to the area I was staying and I was now back at my tent. I settled down for the night, read a book and had some beers and went to sleep. It was probably between 11 p.m. and midnight. I was just in that state where you're semi-conscious, about to drift off but haven't quite just yet. I slowly became aware of a melodic noise somewhere outside the tent. Didn't sound that close, but maybe within like 50 feet? It sounded like a person perfectly humming a tune. After listening for a couple of minutes, it was definitely somebody humming a tune. When I say perfectly, I mean just that. It sounded like a professional singer or something because it was perfectly in tune, no voice breaks or falters at all. I can't remember whether it sounded like a man or a woman. At this point I'm shitting myself because it's just incredibly creepy, like something from a horror film. I hadn't left my tent at this point and the humming hadn't gotten any louder, it just stayed a distant background noise. I didn't know what to do but knew I couldn't just stay there forever, so I mustered the courage to open my tent as slowly and quietly as I could to see if I could see anything or tell where the noise was coming from. Within 5 seconds of me poking my head out of the tent, the humming stopped. It didn't fade away or anything, it just stopped dead as if someone had pressed pause on a recording. I'm still very on edge at this point, but at the time I assumed that's just what it is, someone playing a prank on solo campers with an audio recording. I literally couldn't think of any other explanation. Based on that assumption I shouted something like "You are not funny, FCK off." That made me feel a bit better because it felt like I'd addressed the issue. But for whatever reason it helped my nerves a bit at the time. I let that hang in the air for like 10 more seconds whilst my head is still poking out of the tent, and it stays quiet. I'm kinda satisfied by this point, so I begin moving back in. As I'm reaching for the tent zipper though, the humming starts again, same tune, but much louder, much closer and from the completely opposite direction. My heart completely sinks because there is no way someone could have moved from the first source of the noise to the second without me seeing or hearing something. Literally impossible. It was perfectly quiet in the woods, not even any breeze against the leaves. And yeah, it was dark but I could still see short distances thanks to the moonlight. In the back of my mind though, my subconscious is clearly working overtime trying to rationalize this, and I guess I must have assumed that there were multiple pranksters out there with multiple audio recordings. I can't exactly remember what my thought process was at this point because it's truthfully all a blur. But for one reason or another I stormed angrily out of the tent towards the now quite loud sound. It sounded as if the person humming was within like 10 feet of the tent. I got up out of the tent, turned towards the noise ready to scream at the perpetrator or even attack if necessary. That's when I see this humanoid figure silhouetted against the tree line, maybe 15 feet away from me. My best description of it is this: it was a large, thin figure that was shaped like a human, but way too tall and proportioned all wrong. It was huge, I would guess over 7 feet. Its limbs were unnaturally long, like it had been stretched out in all directions. Its head appeared very small and rounded. I think the figure was gray in color, but I can't be 100% sure because of the poor visibility. I couldn't make out much of its face at all, it just seemed to be shrouded in shadow. I definitely didn't notice any features like eyes, mouth or nose. It was standing quite still facing directly towards me. I say quite still because there was some movement, in the same way that a person or animal would sway back and forth or make some minor body movements etc. if they were standing up. This was a real, living thing. I know that for a fact, not an illusion, not a prop or prank. This thing was standing right in front of me and was aware of my presence. I'm literally paralyzed by fear at this point. I have never felt anything like it before or since, just a primal terror which has left me cold, shaking, just standing there quite literally unable to move. I distinctly remember thinking that I need to get away, but I could not physically move my body. It was the most terrified I have ever been. As I first laid eyes on this creature, the humming stopped and immediately it started humming again, but not a song. It started softly signing my name, in what sounded like my voice. That sounds f-king ridiculous I know, but I swear that's how I remember it. Even though it was singing in my voice though, it didn't sound right, the syllables were just off, as though a non-human had heard speech once and was trying to mimic it for the first time, poorly. I haven't described it well, but I don't think I know the words to do so. This can't have gone on for more than about 10 seconds, but it felt like forever, me standing there, this creature standing, motionless and singing my name. At some point though, every cell in my body just switched and I managed to turn and run as fast as I ever have in the opposite direction. For maybe 2 minutes I was literally sprinting through the woods in just my socks and PJs, with absolutely no other thought in my mind other than putting distance between myself and that thing. I had no idea which direction I was going or how I'd make it back to my tent. When I eventually stopped, I just leaned against this tree, panting for ages. The forest was still completely silent. I must have stayed by that tree for about 2 hours, waiting for my heart rate to settle, trying to calm down and decide what to do. I didn't want to go back to my tent. I was quite happy to leave all my stuff there, but I needed my phone and car keys to get home. I was several miles away from anywhere. I eventually made my way back slowly. It wasn't too hard to navigate back to my tent in those woods because the tree distribution wasn't very dense. I also hadn't gone as far as I first feared. Lol. Once back at my tent I grabbed just my phone and keys, and went back to my car as fast as I was comfortable. Spent the rest of the night sitting in the back seat on my phone, shaking. Didn't even try to get any sleep. Once the sun was up I managed to go back and pack my stuff up and left as quickly as I could. After that I took a 2+ year break from solo camping, something I normally do every 3 to 4 months. So that's my experience, make of it what you will. That has stayed with me ever since and I know it always will. I don't know what was in the woods with me that night, but it has scarred me, and transformed the way I think about supernatural experiences etc. If anyone has encountered anything similar to what I described, I'd be interested to hear. Thanks for reading and sorry this was so long. Lol.